Imagine standing by a freezing river in Europe, roughly 45,000 years ago. Across the water through the mist, you see another group of people. They have a fire going. They are carrying sharp stone spears. An adult is cradling a child with deep care. They look back at you with the exact same cautious defensive stare that you are giving them. But as you look closer, you notice the differences. Their faces are wider, with heavy brow ridges and large noses built to warm freezing air before it hits their lungs. Their bodies are shorter, thicker, and shockingly powerful. They are human, but they are not your species. Over the next few thousand years, your descendants, Homo sapiens, would continue to multiply and spread across every corner of the globe. Meanwhile, their descendants would quietly vanish from the fossil record forever. What actually happened during those millennia? Were we simply smarter than them? Were there just more of us? Did we launch a brutal all-out war to wipe out every other human species on the planet? Or is the truth that they never actually left? Today, human beings across the planet come in a vast diversity of skin tones, body shapes, languages, and cultures. But deep down in our genetic code, every single one of us belongs to exactly the same species, Homo sapiens. This exclusivity makes our current world feel normal, as if having only one human species dominating the Earth was always inevitable. But for most of recent evolutionary history, the human family tree was never a straight ladder with us sitting at the very top. It was a dense, tangled bush with multiple branches existing side by side. Right around the time your Homo sapiens ancestors began taking their first long steps out of Africa, the world outside was already crowded. The resilient Neanderthals were dominating the freezing landscapes of Europe and Western Asia. The mysterious Denisovans were stretched across the mountains and high plateaus of Asia. On the island of Flores, in Indonesia, a tiny human species standing barely 3 feet tall, Homo floresiensis, was hunting dwarf elephants. And in the Philippines, fossils of Homo luzonensis show that yet another human line was uniquely adapting to island life. Multiple human species were breathing the air of this planet at the exact same time. And yet today, every human face you see on the street belongs to Homo sapiens. An entire world of diverse humans vanished, leaving just a single branch standing. Why did our branch keep growing while all the others fell away? When faced with this question, the most common answers usually fall into 3 simple buckets. 1, our brains were bigger and superior. 2, we were violent super predators who systematically slaughtered them in bloody wars. And 3, a catastrophic climate shift wiped them out while we just got lucky. But modern science shows that all 3 of those explanations are way too simple and largely incorrect. Neanderthals were not dim-witted brutes. They survived and dominated Eurasia for hundreds of thousands of years, a stretch of time immensely longer than the entire lifespan of modern human civilization. On average, their brains were actually slightly larger than ours. They crafted sophisticated stone tools, controlled fire-hunted massive dangerous Ice Age beasts at close quarters, and buried their dead with deep sorrow. They also survived one brutal Ice Age cycle after another. There was no single magic superpower, and no epic final battle that explains their disappearance. Instead, the secret to how Homo sapiens became the last one standing lies in a chain of small, subtle advantages that took root and operated quietly over thousands of generations. To understand that process, you have to rethink what extinction actually looks like. In nature, extinction rarely looks like a total war where one side is annihilated overnight. It looks much more like a slow, painful erosion. Imagine a small prehistoric community of roughly 30 people. A severe winter hits and takes the lives of their 2 best hunters. A new disease emerges, and a few toddlers don't make it to adulthood. A valley that used to be packed with game dries up. A mountain pass is blocked by ice, completely cutting off contact with their nearest neighboring tribe. And then a specialized technique for shaping stone spears is lost forever, simply because the only elderly toolmaker in the group dies before passing it on. When a population is already small and fragmented, these localized setbacks start to compound over time. If there isn't another group arriving from the outside to provide reinforcements, bring new mates, share food, or reteach lost survival skills, that tribe's fire slowly dies out. Extinction isn't the dramatic moment a species is defeated on a battlefield. It is the quiet moment when the very last group loses the ability to bounce back from ordinary natural disasters. And by tracking the traces of those declines, scientists have uncovered 5 critical pieces of evidence explaining why Homo sapiens was the only line to endure. Evidence number 1. Our exclusivity is a shocking recent phenomenon. Neanderthals only vanished around 40,000 years ago, a mere blink of an eye in geological time. Tools associated with the tiny humans on the island of Flores persisted until about 50,000 years ago. Fossils of Homo lusinensis in the Philippines date back to around the same era. And with the Denisovans, even though their fossil record is tiny, genetic data proves that multiple distinct Denisovan populations thrived and interbred with our ancestors again and again. We didn't evolve in an empty world and easily conquer it. We were the latecomers stepping into a planet already populated by human cousins who had been living and adapting to their local environments long before we ever arrived. Evidence number 2. Population size matters more than individual genius. Picture 2 different social models on a chessboard. On one side is a human species that might be physically stronger and individually brilliant, but they live in isolated, scattered groups of 10 people who rarely interact. On the other side is Homo sapiens, a species whose individuals aren't necessarily smarter, but who maintain a much larger overall population, constantly moving, splitting and reconnecting across hundreds of smaller bands. When a brutal winter sweeps across the continent, both sides might lose a few camps. But the side with the larger population bench will always have backup tribes from neighboring regions overflowing into the empty territory, repopulating the land and restoring the system. In a survival game played across millennia, you don't need to win every single encounter. You just need enough population numbers to recover from inevitable defeats faster than your competition. Evidence number 3. Real power doesn't live inside a single brain. It lives inside a network. Archaeologists call Homo sapiens generalist specialists. We could survive in a massive variety of extreme environments, from rainforests to deserts, while simultaneously developing highly specialized tools for each specific zone. At the Xiyu site in northern China, scientists excavated a Homo sapiens tool assemblage dating back 45,000 years. The stunning discovery was that the obsidian blades found there had been transported from volcanic sources located 500 to 600 miles away. This doesn't mean one prehistoric person walked 1,000 miles just to grab a rock. It proves the existence of long-distance trade and social networks stretching across tribes. When you have a massive social web, you aren't just trading rocks. You are trading vital information about animal migrations, exchanging mates to prevent genetic inbreeding, passing along new technologies, and most importantly, building an ecological safety net. When your valley suffers a drought, you have a safe haven with a friendly tribe a week's walk away. Neanderthals were creative, but their social networks tended to be smaller and more localized. And during the violent climate swings of the Ice Age, a small isolated network snaps easily. Evidence number 4, climate change doesn't kill a species directly. It traps small populations in vulnerable corners. At the end of the Ice Age, the Earth's weather became violently unstable, swinging rapidly between freezing cold and sudden warmth. These shifts caused forests to shrink, grasslands to migrate, and the massive beasts that served as primary prey to either relocate or go extinct. For remote human species like those on the island of Flores, a severe prolonged drought caused the dwarf stegodon elephant, their primary meat source, to crash. trapping those tiny communities in shrinking habitats with nowhere left to run. Climate acts like a collapsing stage as water and prey disappear. The physical distance between tribes grows, and the chances of finding mates drop to critical levels. A localized accident that would normally be a minor setback suddenly becomes a permanent death sentence for an entire evolutionary branch. And evidence number 5, we didn't just replace them, we absorbed them. This is the genetic truth that completely rewrote the story of human exclusivity. Today, if you are a modern human with ancestry originating outside of Africa, every single cell in your body carries roughly 2 to 3% Neanderthal DNA. For many populations across Asia and Oceania, ancient genetic snippets from Denisovans are still actively flowing through their veins, helping modern bodies adapt to local altitudes and environments. As Homo sapiens migrated across the globe in overwhelming numbers, we encountered these ancient cousins. We didn't just look at them with hostility. We communicated, we lived alongside them, and we had children with them. When a small community consistently interbreeds with a massive incoming population wave, the smaller group's name disappears. Their distinct physical traits get diluted over generations. But they are not erased into nothingness. A genuine piece of their genetic soul snuck aboard the Homo sapiens ark and continues the journey to this very day. This genetic reality delivers a profound shift in perspective. If you carry fragments of Neanderthal and Denisovan DNA inside your body right now, then asking, why did they go extinct while we survived, suddenly becomes the wrong question. Because a very real part of them is still living inside us. Human evolutionary history wasn't an elimination tournament where the winner took all and the losers were wiped off the map. It looked much more like a massive river absorbing water from countless smaller tributaries along its course. Some of those tributary streams dried up completely in the heat of climate shifts. But others bent and merged their waters right into the main Homo sapiens current. Once blended, those tributaries lost their individual names on the map of the earth. But the water they brought into the river never stopped flowing. In the end, what allowed Homo sapiens to outlast everyone else wasn't that we were the strongest or the most ruthless individuals, but that we possessed the most resilient metapopulation system ever seen. A species' survival isn't measured just by the thickness of its bones or the sharpness of its spears. It is an equation of the number of connected groups multiplied by information sharing, multiplied by behavioral flexibility, plus a healthy dose of evolutionary luck. When ecosystems flipped upside down, human lineages that lived as isolated islands were broken by nature one by one. Meanwhile, Homo sapiens functioned like an interconnected underground root system. If one cluster of roots died off nutrients, and life were immediately routed through another pathway to heal the gap. We have a bad habit of writing history from the winner's circle. Because we are the only human species left standing on the lawn today, it is dangerously easy to arrogantly assume that our survival was destiny, that we are the biological pinnacle, and that evolution consciously chose Homo sapiens to rule the planet. But nature doesn't operate on a master plan. And evolution never hands out trophies based on merit or moral superiority. A species can possess extraordinary qualities, surviving thousands of years of brutal ice age freezing, and still quietly fade into the dark simply because their population numbers were too small when an environmental shift hit at the worst possible moment. There is a deep, quiet sadness when you think about the very last Neanderthals. In a cold cave somewhere on the edge of Europe 40,000 years ago. That final group had no concept that they were the end of a magnificent ancient bloodline. They still patiently gathered wood for the fire, carefully chipped flint into tools, and held protected and comforted their crying children in the dark, living and hoping with the simple, timeless belief that tomorrow the world would still have room for their descendants. There was no grand tragic cry echoing across the continent to mark their end. It was simply that when the winter passed, their fire was never lit again. Today, the fact that Homo sapiens is the only human species left on Earth doesn't mean we are invincible. Our solitary existence leaves behind an uncomfortable reminder. Individual intelligence is completely useless if the social fabric supporting it collapses. The greatest superpower that carried our species through every flood, drought, and ice age in history was never the solitary genius of a lone human brain. It was our limitless capacity for connection, our ability to let millions of minds, thousands of tribes, and countless generations share knowledge, cooperate, and lift each other up through the darkest nights of resource scarcity and climate chaos. We are not the species that stood alone at the top of the mountain by pushing all of our brothers and sisters off the ledge. We are simply the last green branch left on a once magnificent tree that used to be thick with foliage. And if you listen closely to the beating of your heart and the blood flowing through your veins today, you will realize that the sap of those vanished branches is still quietly giving you life.